Hello, welcome everyone. Very glad to be here. I'm excited to be the closing speaker today. And I always like to ask before we get started, I have the coveted late afternoon post lunch spot. So just show me with show of hands on a scale of 1 to 10, as my 2-year-old son would say, 1 to 10 fingies. How much energy do we have right now? Oh, fingies. Okay, I see some tens. I don't believe the tens. That's wild. You have 10 out of 10 energy, a sugar power, alcohol power, which brings me to my next point. Yesterday or earlier this week, the organizing team asked me if it was okay if we opened up the bar before my talk. I said yes. Nothing pairs better than a talk on change management than a nice, juicy Sonoma Pinot Noir. Hopefully you have some wine or some beer or some non-alcoholic beverage of choice. This workshop is really a workshop. It's not just going to be me talking. It's going to be interactive in the sense that I'd like you to have this opportunity to think about some of the tools I'll teach by talking to the people at your table. I'm not going to have people come up here and sing and dance, and you can do that after if you want. But this is really more about making the lessons of today's workshop matter for you in your day-to-day work and life. Which brings me to Oak and Reeds. Oak and Reeds is the name of my business. And I named my business Oak and Reeds 10 years ago when I founded it for two reasons. The first is it's the name of an Aesop's fable that I found to be really compelling. Are we familiar with Aesop's fables? What's an Aesop's fable we know? What's the well-known one? The Taylor Swift one. Tortoise and the Hare. Yes, these ancient stories with a lesson or a moral to them. And I'll tell that story in a second. Now, the second reason I named my business Oak and Reeds was the much more important one, and it's because the URL was available. The 30-second version of the story of the Oak and the Reeds goes like this. There was a big, tall oak tree standing by the side of a river. And the oak tree was talking to these reeds, these tall grasses. And the oak tree had a little bit of an ego, kind of an attitude. And the oak tree was talking down to these reeds and saying, look at me, I'm this fantastic oak tree. I've got these deep roots, this massive trunk, these huge long branches, thousands of healthy, beautiful leaves. And you're just a bunch of puny reeds. You're just flimsy grass. Every time there's a gust of wind, you basically blow over and touch the ground. I can't imagine how you've survived. You're weak. But then, overnight, things changed. A huge storm rolled in. Lots of wind, rain, thunder, lightning, hail, the works. And the storm was so strong, it actually pulled the oak tree up from the ground, snapped its trunk in half, and killed it instantly. But the reeds survived. Every time there was a gust of wind, they flopped over, and then in the morning, they popped right back up like nothing had happened. The moral, like it was 2,000 years ago when this story was written by Aesop, the moral is clear. It doesn't matter how big and strong you are. It doesn't matter how many branches you have or how deep your roots are, or how many employees you have, or how many years you've been in business, or how many degrees you have. What matters in the face of change and what matters in the face of uncertainty is flexibility. This is what I like to bring to all of my work. I'm a workshop facilitator, I'm a leadership trainer, I'm a one-on-one coach. I do tons of work to help leaders communicate and lead teams more effectively. And I try to bake this into every time I work with a client. And it's how are you being more flexible? Because we are living in 2025 in a moment of incredible speed and volatility of change. So these tools we're going to talk about today are useful both at work and in life. Because if you come up to me after this workshop and say, I didn't really see where I could use this because I'm not going through any changes right now, I'm not going to believe you. I'm just not going to believe you because that's not true for anyone. So let's jump into it. I'm going to teach one tool today. And I want us to, as we're going through this, I had this up on the slide earlier, I want us to think about what is a change you are going through right now? What's a change you're going through right now? Because I'd love for you to think about, what do these moments of change look like for me? It could be a personal change, it could be a professional change, it could be that messy in between. Doesn't matter. Something top of mind. I'll be giving my own examples throughout, so you can start to think about how you could use these tools today. The tool I want to talk about is something called the change curve. And the change curve has a little bit of an interesting background. This is a tool that change management consultants like myself have been using for decades. This is not breaking news. This is not new. This is not the ChatGPT of change management techniques. This is like 40 years old. And it actually comes from something before that. It comes from the work of a psychologist named Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. Show of hands, has anyone heard that name before? Yeah, shout it out. What is she known for? The grief cycle, grieving. So if you've ever heard of these stages like bargaining, like acceptance, like all of those stages of grieving, she came up with those in her research way back in the 1960s. She found that human beings, when processing a loss, tend to go through the same recognizable emotional steps each time. Now, we're humans, we're messy, it's not always so clean, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but these recognizable stages are really helpful to figure out, what does someone need to process a loss. Fast forward to the 80s, really. Change management consultants picked up this idea and basically looked at change in organizations or change in your career as a grieving cycle. The big insight is for anyone to accept a change and move forward and start to embrace a new technology, a new system, a new process, they have to do two things. They have to let go and grieve the old way of doing things before they accept and are prepared to do the new one. That's it. So this letting go process is how I want to look at change today. It's a bit of a grief process, and we're going to notice some of these stages, and I bet you will start to notice what these stages look like for you when dealing with these emotions of change at work. So let's jump in. I'm a consultant. I have been my entire career, so I have to plot things on a graph. They take away my consulting license if I don't make a fancy little graph out of something as complex as emotions. So let's look at this graph. The x-axis is time, which is really important. The x-axis is basically, what's the thing that helps someone process a change? It's not money. It's not the number of PowerPoints. It's not the number of meetings you have with your CEO or how well your all hands goes. It's time. That's it. So giving people time is the most important thing, first and foremost. Second, we're going to look at the y-axis. As someone goes through a change, we want them to be higher up on this y-axis. If it's a personal change, it might be happiness. If it's a work change, it might be efficiency or sales data or number of projects completed. It's going to depend, right? But higher is better, lower is worse. Typically, when first confronted with a change, most people say, no, that's not real. That's not going to happen to me. That's someone else's problem. It's shock and denial. We don't even really see someone even processing the idea that this change is going to happen. So there's a lot of like hoping that this won't really occur. You don't really notice a lot of change in people's work behaviors. And you hear people saying things like, oh, my role's not affected. That's going to be someone else's problem. Some other team is going to have to use this new project management software or whatever. And I'll give a personal example, right? If we're thinking about a change, let's think about spring of 2020, right? This kind of glorious time before a major storm was about to happen. And I was reading the news in February of 2020 going, oh, there's this like coronavirus thing happening. What's that? That's definitely not going to affect my business, where I go into rooms of 30 strangers in enclosed conference rooms and talk at people for 3 hours, and I get on planes and go to Chicago. This isn't going to affect my client work in New York that I had scheduled for April 12th, 2020. That's someone else's issue. Obviously, I was wrong. But here I was, booked to teach change management skills and doing my own denial of what was about to happen. It's human instinct to not want to jump right in right off the bat. The problem is things tend to get worse with a change before they get better. So the first thing to come is this frustration stage, anger and frustration. So what happens? Whose fault is this? Who messed up that's making us have to upgrade our enterprise software? What the heck? Who broke it? Whose fault is this? Or you start to look at, I don't have the training. What they're asking for is impossible. Or this wasn't the job I signed up for. I can't do this. I can't learn this new technology. There's a ton of negative, frustrating feelings. The wild thing about change is this is true even for positive changes. Even for things you know are ultimately good, there's always this early onslaught of frustration as you're learning something new. For me, I have a 2-year-old son. Those first 6 months, I was thinking about the change curve all the time, right? This was this incredible moment. He was happy, he was healthy, things were going well, and I was just so frustrated. I had to learn 1,000 new things. Not to mention my wife, who had to learn 10,000 new things. Changing diapers, dealing with sleep, like all this new stuff is hard the first time. As adults, we get frustrated when we have to learn new things, and that's why we also call this the learning curve, right? Couple things to note. It can be really frustrating as leaders if we are instituting a change and we have the benefit of going through this curve in private or just with our fellow senior leaders. And then we're already through to the other side, which I'm going to describe in a moment. And we then launch it in this big, exciting event, and then everyone is pissed. How many times has that happened? And you go, well, what the heck? All the benefits are there. The presentation was great. We've done all this due diligence. This is the right move. Why is everyone complaining about the font size or the color of the dashboard? Like, what is this? It's this. This is just what happens when faced with something new. You have to let go of the old. So there's a lot of blocking. And so one thing that often happens is people go, well, maybe if I just ignore it, they'll skip me and I won't have to do it. Maybe if I don't do anything at all, if I stand really still, they'll forget about the whole thing. And you're laughing a little bit because sometimes this works, right? And as organizations, we have to make real strategic decisions. Do we allow people to use that tactic and get away with it? Because some people, we do, right? They're so critical, we don't actually ask them to move all the way through. More on that later. Stage 2, it's stressful, it's unpleasant, but the problem is things tend to get worse before they get better. So in a moment, I'm going to actually ask you to have like a quick 2-minute conversation at your table. I want you to reflect on what some of these stages look like, but I want to describe stage 3 first. Stage 2, anger and frustration. People are complaining. They're booking time on your calendar. They're walking in your office with a list of 10 things that are wrong with this new idea. Stage 3 is quiet, confusion and depression. What does this look like? It looks like cameras off, microphones muted on your Zoom or Teams meeting. It looks like passive-aggressive one-word responses to your email. These are people kind of shutting down and getting to the worst parts of the grieving process, of truly on the cusp of letting go, but fearing what that means. We start to see people question their role. Is this the right job for me? Will I be here in 3 months if they're really asking me to do this? Weirdly enough, this is the hardest moment for people to see the vision. The vision's a lot clearer on day 1 when they're in that shock and denial phase or even in the anger phase than it is in phase 2 because people are going inward. They're kind of shutting down. Performance usually drops here. Worst point emotionally, and there's a little bit of nihilism that can come up. So you hear people saying, well, no one's listening to me. No one's listening to my feedback. My role is pointless. No one's asking me questions. There's this giving up feeling. Your role as a leader, especially in the people world and the HR world, if you think about it, change management does 2 things. It squeezes the graph vertically, so this dip isn't quite so severe, and then it squeezes it horizontally so that we get through this quicker. And you especially want to get people out of this bottom phase as quickly as possible. In a moment, I'm going to talk about what you do. I'm going to give you some coaching strategies, but really it's important to identify where people are so you can meet them where they're at. So I want to take a moment. I want to give you a chance, a 2-minute conversation with whoever is next to you. What does this phase look like for you or the people around you? How do you know when people are stuck at the bottom of the change curve? And specifically, like, what does that look like for you? How do you know you're at this worst processing moment? Because in a moment, we're going to talk about how things get better. So turn to the person next to you. Share with them. Be a little vulnerable. You've got wine. Let's take a big swig of wine. 3 minutes, we'll come back. What does this bottom look like for you? One more minute. One more minute. Let's come back together. If you can hear me, clap once. If you can hear me, clap twice. All right. It works for third graders. It works for adults. So I'd love to hear from a couple people, maybe 2 people. What do you notice about what this moment is like, either for yourself or for the people around you at work? How do you know when people are stuck at the bottom of this curve, either yourself or others? What do you look for? What do you see or feel? What do you think? Yeah, right here. Frustration. Yeah, frustration for sure. I think that's a great word. What else does this look or feel like? I see a hand back there. Passive. Yeah, passive aggressiveness. I think is a great version of like heading into 3 and then shutting down. Where it's like, don't talk to me. Like, I don't want to deal with you. I don't want to talk to you. This is not my time. Now here's the thing. Oh, one more thought. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Detachment, engagement is down, people calling in sick, absenteeism, all sorts of different versions depending on your role and what they're working on. The goal here, like I said, reduce the depth of the curve, reduce the amount of time. Now, what do we pay attention to know that someone has made it through this curve? Really important to have your ears out for stage 4, acceptance. By far, the simplest way to know that someone has accepted this change is the following one thing. If you walk away with only one thing from this workshop, I will have failed. However, it is also this one thing to listen for. Listen for people's language changing. You know someone has accepted a change because their language changes. They go from talking in the past tense to talking in the present tense. They stop talking about, oh man, our invoicing process used to be so much easier in the old operation system. That was so much simpler. I was so much better at it. And they start talking with, well, I guess this is happening, so I might as well get on board. They've grieved the loss. And it might sound silly to think about grieving the loss of a CRM system, but that's what we're doing. That's the change process. We're letting go of all this accumulated knowledge and expertise to make room for the new. And so have your ears out for that, because it's not like people are throwing a parade for this new thing. They're not overjoyed. They're saying, well, I guess we're going to do it, so I might as well try. That is huge. That's a huge moment. And do not fall into the trap that a lot of leaders fall into, which is punishing people for getting here and not being overjoyed, for being sarcastic and saying, well, what took you so long? Well, they're going through the dang curve, man. Like, and they're here now. So be gentle, because people can easily fall backwards, back into 3, if they get their wrist slapped for not being perfect day 1. So enjoy this, be gentle, but celebrate the fact that they're here. You start to see people testing. Ooh, I'm going to try out the new system. I'm going to explore it. I'm going to show up to the meeting. They're not, evangelizing it yet, but they are present in today rather than the past. So for me, a good example of this was, I'll go back to that COVID example. Right around summer of 2020, wild time. I realized I was not getting on a plane anytime soon. Right? This business where I was doing in-person training was not going to be instantly reactivated. So many organizations were saying, we'll be back in the office in 6 weeks. We'll be back in the office by Christmas. We'll be back in the office by New Year's. Remember that fall? It was, and as a change management expert, I'm thinking like, this is not the way to talk about it. What I had to do with myself is accept the fact that I wasn't going to be face-to-face with a client for a year. And once I got to that point around that summer or fall, I was actually able to start thinking clearly about what virtual training would look like. I had to accept that I was not going to be in person for a year. So what does that mean? Wasn't happy about it, but I accepted it. And that then leads to problem solving. Finally starting to see some upward momentum. This is the exciting part. And people are here because they're actually trying out the new tools. They're empowered. You see people taking ownership. You see people coming up with new roles, taking on responsibilities they hadn't had before. This is the moment when people innovate. And what it sounds like is, oh, I get it now. I get why we're doing this. This is great. I get how this is going to help us with XYZ deliverable or KPI. Like, this is really cool. Like, why didn't we do this sooner? And you're like, okay, come on. We're trying to do it sooner. What can be frustrating is it takes all the way to stage 5 to be at a higher level than when we started. You can see it on that curve. A lot of patience is required. And so what this can look like is, for me, my business, realizing there was a lot of virtual training to be done. All sorts of new content I was coming up with that fall, realizing that the fact that everyone is at home means they're going to need training on how to communicate virtually. So a lot of my business opened up, doing a lot more on Zoom, a lot more webinars, new things I wouldn't have come up with had I just been holding my breath and waiting to be back in person. What's important to remember is this moment of problem solving, it's limited. It's a limited moment. I always liken this to that moment of moving. Who here has moved homes recently? Right? Congratulations. Right? You've gone through a lot. And when you move to a new home or a new apartment and you got everything in boxes, you get into the house, and in those first couple weeks, you basically decide, how are we going to set up the kitchen? Where does the TV go? How are we going to arrange the couch? What's going on the walls of the bathroom? Kind of this flurry of decision making. And then if it's not out of the box in those first 2 to 3 weeks, it is in the box for the next 3 years in the garage. Right? It's just normal human nature. That's stage 5 of the change curve. So you want to remember that this surge of energy is limited, and it's going to come with a lot of great ideas. Don't expect that people will be creating those great ideas for the next 6 months, because we'll be on to the next change and the focus will shift. So in this moment, I'll talk more later, but this is an opportunity to host brainstorms, to highlight people who are being really creative, and just generally encourage this test and learn attitude when people are here. Because once you get to 6, it's the new normal. It's just how we work now. People are here because you hear them saying things like, wow, I could never imagine going back to the old way. I don't know how we operated with that old system or that old office, or how did we commute into the office 5 days a week in the Bay Area? How did we do that? I spent hours in the car. This hybrid work thing makes total sense, right? Things like that, that's how you know, okay, this is now set. The most important thing you can do here is debrief. And even if it's a personal change, debrief with yourself. This is something I'm doing constantly with myself as my son becomes this little guy. He goes from this little baby to now he's 2 and he started preschool last week. And I'll be honest with you, I was stuck in stage 3 for all of like a week. I was a mess. Are you seeing this little guy walking off to school with a backpack, grieving the loss of him as a baby? Right? That was a real thing. That was hard. But what you want to do is ask yourself and your teams 2 questions. This is the debrief. It's easy. What did you learn about yourself by going through this change? And what can we do next time to get you through this curve faster? What did you learn about yourself? And what will you need the next time to get through this curve most effectively? If you can get those answers from yourself and from your team right when it's fresh in people's minds, that is incredibly valuable information that you then get to use for the next change. You start to build a change culture by asking people personally what got them through. Okay, I'm going to pause here because I'm going to now start talking about coaching strategies, like what do people need at each of these stages, but I want to pause. Are there any questions so far? And if you need to get up and get more wine, I'm not going to be mad. That's okay. All right. Yes, I see a question. Yeah. Great question. So just to repeat that, like, do you show this curve to people and ask them to debrief? The short, pithy answer is yes. Like, I fully advocate you bringing this curve to your teams and making it very public. Because at the end of this workshop, in like 15 minutes, so don't hold your breath, 15 minutes, I'm going to show you a short exercise, which is all about figuring out where people are and then figuring out what to do with them at a moment in time. So if you can make this common language with your teams and get people to raise their hand and say like, hey, like today, I'm in stage 3. I'm having a really hard time with this. Maybe come back to me tomorrow. The whole goal is to make talking about your feelings at work a little less scary because it's an inherently emotional process. So you could say like, hey, I'm getting a lot of, you can have fun with it, right? I'm getting a lot of stage 2 anger from you. Is that where you're at? Are you pissed about this? And they go, yeah, I have these questions. And then you can have an actual conversation about what's going on that's fact-based rather than putting up with passive aggression, which is not okay in the workplace. That's a long, does that answer your question? Kind of a long answer. I'll also offer, I see some phones coming out. So you can always take photos of me, but I will give you these slides. So I'll put a QR code up. But again, get this side. I've been working on that one. It's like, I don't actually know which side. Okay, I can't be on the stage too long. I'm going to start doing weird moves. What's important to know is if you know where someone is on the curve, you know what they need. And the really tricky part about change is everyone's going to be in a different place on any given day. That's why change management consultants can charge exorbitant rates because it's really hard and it changes moment to moment. One way to think of this is for any given change, it's like people are these little dots moving through this curve, and you can kind of see them all moving at different speeds and in different moments throughout this change. At the beginning, what do people need? Clear, accurate information. That's it. So often, we will launch headfirst into an organizational change. We don't have our ducks in a row. And then we get a ton of questions, and we're not quite sure how to answer them. I'm speaking we as leadership of a company or a company that hires me to help them with change. So what do we need? People need information. They need the answers to 2 questions. Simple questions. It takes a lot of work to answer these questions. The 2 questions are, what's in it for me? If I buy into this change, how does this make my life better? This is not what's good for the company. If any of you have seen the movie Office Space, one of my favorite movies, that big banner, is this good for the company? Right? They're making fun of the fact that no one cares. They care, how does this make my life better? How does this put more money in my pocket? How does this save me time? How does this get me back home earlier so I can hang out with my family and friends? How does this put me in a good light for promotion? Like, I'm talking like real tactical, and I'll use the word selfish so that people understand why they benefit. So many changes get communicated. It's good for shareholders. It's good for hitting our goals. It's good for hitting these things. All of that can be true, but how does that help me, the marketing associate? How does this help me, the head of IT? How does this help me, the customer? Those are stakeholders as well. Because if you're creating a new portal and all the customers have to learn how to pay their bills or pay their invoices, how do they benefit? And it might be obvious to you, but you got to say it to them. Like, oh, we're going to process invoices 10 days faster. Great. I'll figure this out today, right? I want to get paid. Put yourself in their shoes and think about it from their point of view. This can be a tricky process because sometimes there's not a lot in it for them. So is there something we need to do to sweeten the deal? So that this is the kind of thinking we want to do. And then the other question we have to answer is why? What's broken? Why are we making this change? And what do I benefit from buying into this change? If you can answer that for everyone in your organization, this is going to go really smoothly. If you can't answer those questions, or what usually happens is you get 3 different leaders answering it 3 different ways, then you slow people down. They just don't get through this because they don't believe you. And you have to re-answer the same stuff over and over. So what does this look like? Share context, share research, share due diligence, share a lot. Share it in different ways. Have an FAQ, have meetings, empower your managers to explain it. You're going to have to explain this a bunch of different ways over and over again. We just had a conversation about marketing, right? Sometimes someone needs 7 to 10 touch points before they buy in or buy a product. You're marketing the change to your employees. Think of the same way. One thing to skip. This is a big tip. Do not announce the change for the first time at your all hands meeting. Do not announce the change for the first time with everyone in the same room. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to get 100 or 200 or 500 people all being shocked and angry and frustrated all at the same time, all in the same room. They're going to bring the pitchforks, they're going to bring the torches, and you're going to have a mess. It is so much more effective to empower managers to announce big changes to their teams in smaller groups. Give them the talking points. What's in it for me? Why are we doing this? Have them answer a bunch of questions, and then gather people together a little bit later so that a lot of this feedback or questions or frustrations can be vented without this echo chamber effect. Does that make sense? It's just do it a little later when people are a little bit more excited and you can showcase some of the changes. Not all at the beginning. It's a temptation, and the temptation usually comes from the CEO who's all the way to the new normal and is excited and wants to get everyone excited as they are without remembering that people are going to be mad first. And that's just how it works. All right. 2 more things, then I want to do an exercise, and then we'll be out here. When people are stuck at the bottom, they want someone to listen to them. Emotional support is simple, but it is hard. Here's what it looks like. You're just listening to reflect. You're listening to someone explain how they're feeling. They're frustrated about the change. They're worried about their job. They're unclear on the benefits. And you're just putting back their own words in their thoughts in your words back to them. You need to validate. This is hard. It will get better, but I understand you're frustrated because we're putting a lot on your plate right now. People are not really looking for a fix. They're not really looking for a solution at this point. They're just looking to vent and be heard. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the leadership doing this. You know, this kind of emotional work, this emotional labor, often falls to HR. It doesn't have to. This can be delegated out to people who are good listeners. But someone has to do it. And a lot of people don't necessarily have the network of really good friends in the organization to kind of complain to. So you may have to provide some official kind of sounding boards for people to go to and vent. An email distribution list with questions and frustrations, office hours, all these different conversations all work for this same goal. And what you can do is just kind of provide 1 or 2 next steps. You know what? Don't tackle it all. Just try this one thing tomorrow, and you'll inch your way towards acceptance. You don't want to overwhelm people at this stage. Just give them a chance to be frustrated. Because again, back to the x-axis, what this takes is time. It's not the number of ideas you offer someone. It's that they'll wake up tomorrow and feel better, right? Like when I was sad that my son is becoming a person, which again, has happened to everyone in this room. Everyone went from being 2 to 3. All I just needed was to talk about it and then wake up the next day and go, he's a preschooler now. It's okay. I didn't need a fix. There was no fix. Going back to this idea of grief, we're letting go. And in that last moment of letting go, you got to let it go and voice those concerns. That's what's happening here. And then the fun part is when people are in stage 3. It's back here. So once someone makes it here, you kind of just want to get out of their way. That's all it is. So direction and guidance is this final coaching strategy for someone who's made it to acceptance. You want to embrace this idea of a test and learn attitude. Give people the freedom to make some mistakes operating in this new environment. Have a fail of the week as we try out our new CRM system, right? Make it public, lower the cost, have some fun, lower your ego as a leader, share some of the mistakes you've made along the way to embracing this new change, and you'll get people wanting to show each other what's cool about it. What can be very interesting as a tactic for a leader is find people who are in 5 and 6, go pair them up with folks who are in 3 and 2, and just have them talk. Because at that point, their energy can be infectious, and they're probably tired of listening to you as the head of HR talk about all the benefits. They'd rather hear it from a peer. And once people get to that new normal, then it's time to debrief. This doesn't have to be a huge formal thing. It can be something you do in one-on-ones. It can be something you have a quick 2-question survey. What have you learned about yourself and your work by going through this change? And what will you need the next time to get through this curve more quickly? And hopefully by then you've kind of showed this tool. Like, don't make this a secret. This is public knowledge. This is a language to talk about change. All right, I'm talking quickly. I want to get to a quick exercise that I would highly encourage you to bring back to your teams. Do we have 7 minutes of focus left in us? Yes, we do. Do we have 7 minutes of focus left in us? Okay, great. I love that. If you have a piece of paper, hopefully you have one in front of you, I want you to draw this curve. I want you to just draw this curve. And again, I'll give you these slides so you can run this exercise with your teams. Draw this curve, and I want you to think about what's the change you thought of as an example. What's a change you're going through right now? It could be as small, tiny change, like I'm learning some new app in my phone. It could be a massive organizational change. I'm taking on a brand new role. It could be we're switching over to this software. I'm leading an org restructure. Whatever it is, put your little initials, or make them big. Make your big initials. Where are you on this curve right now? Today at 3:30 in the afternoon on a Wednesday. What are you feeling about this change? Put your initials on there. And then I want you to think about, where are 2 or 3 people who are going through this change with you? Where are they on the curve? Put their initials. These could be your direct reports. It could be your family members. It could be friends. It could be your team. Other people going through this change, where are they? Maybe just pick 2 people. Where would you put them on this curve based on what we talked about and what you're seeing from them? Again, they're not here, so you can go with your gut. Again, this is unscientific. And then I want you to think about one person on this curve. What are you noticing about that person? What evidence do you have that places them at this point on the curve? Like, what are they saying? How are they acting? What's their energy level? What behaviors are they showing? Just kind of think about this. And in a moment, I'm going to give you 3 minutes. Give you 3 minutes to turn to that same person you were chatting with earlier and think about, what could you do to support that person to move through to the next stage? We just talked about 3 coaching strategies. Do they need clear, accurate information? Explain the why or the what's in it for me. That's if they're early on. Are they stuck at the bottom and they just need someone to listen to them, listen and validate? Or are they towards the farther to the right and they're kind of in problem solving and they need some space to experiment and brainstorm? Knowing what you know about these coaching strategies and knowing what you know about that person and their personality, what would help? Does this question make sense to the room? Let's take 3 minutes. Just share your thoughts with your partner, and then we're going to come back together and close out. I'm going to put 3 minutes on the clock. What are you going to do to help that person through to the next stage? One more minute. One more minute in groups. One more minute. If you can hear me, clap once. If you can hear me, clap twice. All right, coming back together. I would love to hear. So we're towards the end of the conversation. I have a quick thing to wrap up with, but this is the opportunity to share reflections or ask questions. So I am curious, are there any questions about this tool now that you've had a chance to think about it, learn about it, and test it out a little bit? What kind of questions do we have? Yeah, I see a hand over there. If we can run a mic so everyone, just so everyone can hear you.
Thank you. I was just curious what your thoughts are about it being a linear thing versus people can bounce back and forth between these different steps along the curve.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Yeah, great question. It is a fool's errand to try to map human emotions on a linear 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 path. So it is definitely not that, right? And a lot of people, stages 2 and 3 might feel the same, and 4 and 5 are wildly different. So it definitely does not move exactly linearly. People jump around a lot more. You could be in 4 on Monday, something happens, you hit a roadblock, you're stuck back in 3, you're frustrated, and you have a bad conversation with your manager, and you go back to 2 and you're pissed, but then you talk to your colleague, and you all of a sudden are excited again by Thursday, right? So you can for sure jump around. It's almost like stations rather than a path. Great question. Yeah. Yeah, what other questions do we have? That's a good one. Yeah, hand right here in the blue.
That's not really a question, but an observation.
Yeah.
Sometimes giving emotional support isn't as
Yeah, and this is the first part. Giving emotional support isn't that easy. And it's not as simple as just sitting and listening. That's effort. There's an exercise I'll often do in a larger version of this where we just have people pair up and one person shares their challenge for 2 minutes and the other person just sits there and listens and then shares back what they heard. And it's exhausting just for 2 minutes of real active listening. So this is something where very often in organizations, there are unspoken people who do this work and don't necessarily get paid for it. And so it's really worthwhile to, one, recognize them, two, expand that pool of people, train people on what listening actually is. I mean, I do a whole workshop on listening because it is a skill that's hard. It's hard to get better at, and it takes effort. It's like going to the gym. Like you got to like work at that, at listening. So yeah, I think there's a lot there. And it's a great observation. Yeah. Other thoughts or questions or observations? I see folks over there. We're getting Bethany her running in today. She's all over the room. Yeah, because the question was, is there an advanced version of people who get stuck in 2 and 3? Give her back the microphone. I want a follow-up question. Tell me more about that. What do you mean by like advanced version? What are you looking for?
Well, I mean, using all of the tools and the suggestions that you made,
Yeah.
done that,
Yeah.
we're still like terminally stuck.
Yeah. Okay. So in change management, we love curves. So there's a whole other curve where we look at people's personalities and certain personality types when it comes to change. This comes from another like great sociologist, E.M. Rogers. He's the person that came up with the idea of an early adopter, which we've probably heard of that term, early adopters, the people in line waiting for the iPhone. It's like you can buy it online. They'll mail it to you. You don't have to wait in line. But people love that. And so there's personality styles when it comes to change. And in most organizations, especially as law of large numbers, it kind of fits a bell curve. So there's like a 10% of people who are those early adopters. Most people are either early majority or late majority. And then there's people who kind of lag behind, who are going to be last. And what's really interesting is the data shows the early majority, probably 30%, look to the early adopters to figure out whether a change is safe. And if the early adopters do it, the majority will follow. Once 51% of your org has adopted it, the late majority will follow. It's just a numbers game. And then the people who lag behind, the laggards, they have to be last. No matter what you throw at them, they're going to be last because it's part of their identity. Like they're the person who brags about the flip phone they just got, right? Not to call it, I think that's a great idea, but like that's part of who they are. They don't like doing new things. And many change initiatives fail because we throw everything at that group to try to get them to be something other than who they are at their core. So the advanced version is like, someone's got to be last. Let's be patient and let them be last and work with the folks who want to be in the middle, which is most of the company. That's kind of a long-winded answer for your question. Yeah, I see a question. I see a hand up over here. Oh no, let's go back there and then here. Sorry, we got the mic over there.
Yeah. Always hard for long tenure, but for new employees, they want to see change and growth. And so, like, you have to use the buddy system of pairing the one on board and the one that's lagging and have them convert.
Yeah, I think those are great observations. Knowing your people is step one. And if in your org, like new folks are generally more eager to hop on, I think it's worthwhile kind of elevating them. Yeah, I had a question back there in the mic. Yeah.
Sorry, do you imagine that it's better to do small changes for like turning an aircraft carrier, or is it good to rip the band-aid off and do all the changes?
Yeah, great question. Do kind of string them out or just layer it on, right? Fill up your plate. In general, without knowing exactly what they are, doing like 10 changes at once is not a good strategy. Because one way to think of it is it's like people have 7 or 8 curves like stacked on top of each other. And it's just a lot of letting go. Like it's a lot of grieving. It's better to be strategic and space them out because it's just really taxing. It is not a rip the Band-Aid off type thing for an organization to try that. So that's my short answer. Now, in some cases, combining some that are kind of, you're just doing the same thing 2 or 3 different times, that may be strategic. But in that case, it's like, well, maybe we're just making one change, right? We're not actually doing 7 small things. Rip the Band-Aid off, not the right approach. Yeah. Great questions. These are good. All right. If you have more questions, come find me afterwards. I'll be in the back, but I do want to wrap up with a couple of closing thoughts, and then we get back to networking and bar. I can never compete with a bar, so that's important to know. Let's recap it all. This is it. This is the thing that is really worth bringing to your leadership team, to your teams, to your life. This is the change curve, and this is what people need when they are at different stages of the curve. For you as an individual, think about it as what you need to ask for. Identifying where you are in the curve, knowing what you need, and then rewarding yourself for processing a change is how you get better at this. It's how you become more resilient. It's how you become someone who doesn't necessarily fear change. And it's how you become a really excellent leader by modeling these moments for people. I want to be super clear. Being good at processing change is not about not feeling emotions. It's not about eliminating these steps. It's about acknowledging where you are, not wallowing, and getting the help you need, and providing that help for your teams proactively. If you punish someone for being bummed about a change, that's not going to make the org stronger. You want to prepare people for listening, prepare people with the answers, and prepare to get out of their way once they come screaming up that hill and they're excited. That's how you make this an organizational strength. So with that, I want to say thank you. If you want the slides, they are right here. I will get out of the way. Do not take a photo of me. This is a way to give feedback, and at the end, there's a download link. If it doesn't work for you, you can come find me. I'll email it to you. Please share this information with your teams. It's really useful. I get a lot of feedback saying just this tool was very, very, very helpful. And quick plug, if you want to work with me, I do training, I do coaching, and I do speaking like this. So I love talking with you about your people development needs. That's both what I love to do and how I pay for my son's preschool. So with that, have a great rest of your day. I'll be in the back chatting with you, and enjoy the networking event. Thank you again for bringing me in.